If you just bought a Canon R7 or you're thinking about buying one, you are in the right place. Today we're going to go over the best Canon EOS R7 settings, including for photo and video, so let's dive right in. What's up, it's Feliciotti and welcome back to another video. Now the first thing I recommend doing when you get a new camera is to write down the serial number of the camera. On the R7 it's located on the bottom. You'll never know when you need this number. For example, if your camera gets stolen or you need to get a repair, it's always good to note that down in a notes app, or you can even register it on Canon's site. Now the second thing I recommend is to charge your battery. Pretty simple one, but right when you open the box you can get excited and just want to start shooting, but it's good to get that battery charged first. And then last but not least, you also want to update the firmware. Canon always adds new features, bug fixes, things like that with firmware updates. It's very simple to update your firmware on the R7. It's basically just dragging a file onto your SD card, putting the SD card in your camera, and then going into an option in the menu, and it updates the firmware. Okay, now that we went over the basics, now we can dive into the camera settings. First, I'm gonna focus on photo settings, and then I'm gonna focus on video settings. So if you're only curious about video settings, you can skip past this part, but for photo settings, let's hop right in. Now, before you edit your camera settings, you wanna make sure that you're not on auto, because being on auto, you will not have the full amount of options on the camera. Right now, I'm in P for program. Now, if we hit menu here, that'll bring us up our menu. And any photographer will say the first thing you should change is the image quality. By default, the camera will shoot in JPEG, but of course we wanna change that to RAW so we can get the best out of the camera. Now, the second thing I like to change is the minimum shutter speed when shooting with auto ISO, and that is in the second shooting menu, and you can see ISO speed settings here, and we're gonna head down to minimum shutter speed, and you can see it's on auto. You can basically overwrite the setting here using the little dial here, and you can see I'm going faster or slower. Basically what this is gonna do is it's gonna prefer a faster shutter speed and a higher ISO. I've just found that this makes your images sharper. Of course, this is all preference, but that's just a small change I like to do on all Canon cameras I get. Next, we'll want to go down to the auto lighting optimizer. And you can see here, we want to disable this. The reason we want to disable this is because it only affects JPEG images basically, but it does affect RAW previews. So it may actually mess up how you visually see the preview, and we don't want that since we're shooting RAW, so I turn that off. Next, we're gonna head over to shooting menu number 5. So let's go over here, and then we'll go down to high ISO speed, noise reduction. Typically this is on standard, but since we want a little more control, our images to be a little sharper and not as processed as by the camera as much, we're gonna wanna change that to low. Next, in shooting menu number 7, you'll find release shutter without card, and we wanna turn that off. Basically, this setting lets you shoot photos even if you have no SD card in there, and in my opinion, it will actually just end up leading you to believe that you have a card in the camera, and then it will just end up confusing you or making you forget a card later, so it's better just to have that off. Now, the next setting is a new setting I've never seen on a Canon camera, but it's really interesting. It's on shooting menu number 8, and you can see it's called auto level. Now, this setting will actually level your image automatically. All of these cameras have a little level in it, so basically if you're a little off kilter, it'll actually use that level information to change the IBIS sensor and level the image for you. It's really cool to watch. I'm gonna show a little example here. It's really interesting, and it's a really cool option. So you can have all your images level easily without finagling that little bit of extra distance there. Also in shooting menu number 8, you'll find image review. And here we can actually change the amount of time our image pops up on the screen to review it. This is obviously up to preference. You can do 2, 4, 8, hold, or off. But if you want to sit and look at your photos for a while after taking them, you can set it to 8 seconds if you'd like. Next, we're going to go to shooting menu number 9, and this will actually let us change the displays that we have while shooting. You can see it's called shooting info display. Basically, this gives us a ton of options while we're shooting, what's shown, and things like that. We're gonna go to screen info settings, and by default, all of these are on. I think it's a little too much. Obviously, it's your preference what you show here. I prefer just to keep 2, 3, and 4 on. This way you have kind of like a minimal-ish view, a view with all of the options, and then a clear view. And then I just disable the rest and save that. If you also want to enable a grid while you're shooting, you can do that here. And you can see I have the 3x3 grid on. We can also change the histogram display. You can see here I have it set to RGB. By default, it's brightness, but if you set it to RGB, you'll actually see all the color values in the preview histogram display. And by default, the display size is large, but we're gonna wanna change it to small. The display of it is really large by default, and I think small is a better option. And then we're gonna go down to display performance. Basically what this is gonna do is change how the displays work in your camera. By default, it's in power saving, which is probably good for most shooters, but if you're shooting a lot of action sports or fast moving subjects, you're definitely going to want to change this to smooth. For me, I don't shoot much action, so I'm going to keep that on power saving. Now in the first autofocus setting menu, you'll find a subject detect mode. And I think this is really good to know where this mode is. For me, I go between photographing cats a lot to people, so it's really good to know where the setting is. It's in the first autofocus setting, but here you can switch between people, animals, vehicles, or just turn off the subject tracking. Also, by default, when the camera doesn't have enough light to focus, it'll shoot a orange light from the front of the camera, which can be jarring in most shooting environments, so I like to turn that off. And that's in autofocus menu 3, and it's called AF Assist Beam Firing, and we're going to turn that off. And another interesting setting is in autofocus menu number 4, and that's the touch and drag autofocus settings. Basically, this enables it so when you're using the viewfinder, you can drag your thumb along the screen and that'll actually move the focal point for you. Of course, you can use the joystick on the back of the R7, but it's just another nice option to know that exists. In the autofocus 4 menu, you'll also find limit AF areas. Basically what this does is that you can actually disable all the different autofocus modes, so you can only just turn on the ones you use. Personally, I'd recommend only using the first one and last one, so we can disable everything in between. This just makes it a lot easier to cycle through all of the autofocus menu settings, so you're not juggling all of the settings. Now, if you use manual focus a lot, you definitely want to change this setting. It's the MF peaking setting. Basically, turning this on, it'll actually show a red outline for what's in focus on your camera. It's super helpful for when you switch the camera to manual focus, because you can visually see the red outline on things that are in focus. Definitely worth trying if you haven't seen it before on a camera. Next, we're going to go to playback menu number 5. And what we're going to actually do is change the magnification option on the camera. So you can see your magnification, and we're going to change it to actual size. This will make it so when you hit the magnify button, it'll instantly go into the actual size of the image. In my opinion, this is really helpful for seeing if the image is in focus. Instead of every time you need to review an image, you want to scroll in and look, really closely. This will just go right in and make it really easy to review your images. In playback number 6, you'll find playback information display, as you can see here, and by default there are so many different modes on to cycle through when you're reviewing your photos. For me personally, I like to disable a lot of these here, so like 9 through 3 basically. 1 and 2 are all I want to see. Obviously, some of this information is going to be better for different people, so this is up to your preference, but it's definitely good to go in here and narrow down what it shows. Also, in playback menu number 6, you'll see highlight alert, and you're going to want to enable this. Basically, what this will do, if the highlight in your image is overexposed and there's no data there, it'll flash on your screen, so it's really obvious where your image is blown out. It's just really helpful when you're reviewing your images, and you can know how to adjust your exposure for certain environments. Next, in the wireless menu, you'll probably want to turn on airplane mode. Now, what this will do is actually disable the Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, things like that. If you don't use those functions, this is a great way to quickly just save battery life, and then when you need them, just turn the airplane mode off. Now, another option that's good to know is the Tools menu 1. There's a format card option, and what this does will actually erase everything on your memory card. Personally, after importing my photos onto my computer, I like to bring the card back to my camera and then actually use the format card option on the camera. So it's really good to know where that option is. Also, if you don't have an SD card yet for your camera, I'll include a link in the description for the best R7 SD cards. Also, in Tool menu 1, you'll find Auto Rotate On. And by default, it'll rotate when you're looking at the camera. So if you're looking at a portrait photo, it'll rotate as you rotate the screen, which sometimes can be kind of annoying. So personally, I like to turn this on just on computer only. Now, the biggest thing I noticed when using the R7 for the first time was every time I changed the mode, to manual, aperture priority, program, those kind of things. Every time you change the option, it actually has a little screen that shows to explain the mode, which is great for beginners, but a lot of people probably want to turn this off. And that's in the Tool menu 2, and you can see here it's called Mode Guide, and we're going to want to disable that. Now, next in Tool menu 3, you can also disable the beep. Every time your camera focuses, a little beep plays, and that can be kind of annoying to a lot of people, so I like to disable that. Also, in Tool menu 6, you'll find copyright information, and here you can actually include your name, your phone number, things like that, things you want to write onto the metadata of every image. So that's all my favorite photography settings for the R7. I also recommend setting up the Wi-Fi. I've seen a lot of friends go out and shoot shoot and then they need the Wi-Fi for a certain reason and it's not set up, and then they're fumbling with it, and it could be an important event and they don't want to have to deal with that. So definitely take a few moments to get familiar with how the Wi-Fi setup is on the camera if you need that function. Also, the last menu of the menu system is the custom menus, and I really recommend putting your favorite functions here. For example, on most of my cameras, I like to put format card, Canon log settings, things like that, things I use. For you, obviously, you probably use like the same 5 functions, and it's great to have a section of the menu where it's just quick functions you need to use on a daily basis. Okay, now that we've gone over my favorite settings for photography on the R7, let's switch the camera over to video mode by using the dial here. I love the way that the R7 uses photo and video mode on the dial here. And now we can talk about the best video settings for the R7. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is change the video recording options. And that is on the first shooting menu. As you can see here, the 4K fine mode will actually use the entire width of the sensor and actually downscale the image from a 6K image to a 4K image, making your footage more sharp. So I recommend highly to use the 4K fine feature if you want to have your footage look the best as possible. I shoot in 24 FPS. This will be up to your preference if you want to shoot 30 or 24, and then I shoot in the default IPB setting. But if you're shooting something really long and you want to save space, hard drive space, I really recommend using the compressed light IPB setting here. It's really not that big of a difference between the quality, but just for the best image quality, I like to keep it on the IPB setting. Now next, if you're using an external microphone on top of the camera, if you're vlogging or recording videos, things like that, you're definitely going to want to go to the sound recording setting on the shooting menu 1. And you can see I already have it on manual here. By default, it'll be on auto. And what this will do is it'll actually change the levels of your camera as it's filming. So for example, if it becomes very quiet, the levels increase, and then if it becomes very loud, it decreases. But this can cause a big issue if you're using a microphone, because the microphone will end up being quiet and then the camera will take that as a hint to increase the levels, and you'll get a bunch of noise in your audio. So a lot of people will end up getting like a hiss in their microphone and they'll think that's a problem with the microphone, but it's actually because they're not using the manual recording setting. And you can see here, I'm going to set it to manual, and you can actually pick recording level. For my microphone, I can keep it on the 1 notch up. This is going to be up to what microphone you have. Test it out a lot. Definitely worth getting perfected for your setup. If you're planning on shooting time lapses using the time lapse mode on the R7, you can go over to the shooting menu 2. And then go to ISO speed settings, and you can see here there's a time-lapse max for auto. Basically, by default, this is set to 6400, and it will actually add a lot of noise to when you're doing the automatic time-lapse in the camera. I find this to be very odd that this is the default, because it adds a lot of noise to your image, especially because if you're doing a time-lapse, you're probably on a tripod. So I like to change this to ISO 400 or 800. Basically, this will reduce noise in your time lapses when you record them on the camera using the built-in function. Now, for video shooters who want to get the highest possible quality out of this camera, you're going to want to go to shooting menu 3, and you'll find Canon log settings. This camera actually lets you shoot in Canon log 3, which is a base ISO of 800, and it's actually what I'm shooting this video on right now on my R5. But basically, it gives you the most amount of information from the camera, giving you information in the highlights and the shadows. So you're gonna wanna turn that on. And I also like to change the characteristics and make it a little bit sharper here. So I'm gonna make it, put it on the 3rd sharpening setting. And I like to do the cinema gambit color space. Now, if you're not familiar with shooting C-Log, I highly recommend looking up a tutorial. There's plenty of LUTs that'll actually, you can apply to the footage, and it helps you make it look more normal, and then you can kind of color grade from there. But it's definitely worth investing your time, in my opinion, if you're doing a lot of video shooting. Now, this is kind of dependent if you're using the C-Log 3 setting I just mentioned, but in shooting menu 6, you can turn on zebras. So let me scroll down here, zebra setting, and I'm gonna turn it on. And I use the zebra pattern 2 and then change zebra 2 level to 95%. Now what this is gonna actually do is it's gonna add a little zebra effect on your footage, so you'll actually know when you're overexposing your shot. This is really helpful because you're gonna wanna overexpose your C-Log footage right almost at the level where you're almost too overexposed, so having the zebra show up is really helpful for that setting. Also, in shooting menu 6, you'll find image stabilization modes for shooting video. For example, you can turn on IS, which uses the stabilization in the sensor, which I recommend turning on, and you can also turn on digital IS for on or enhanced. Basically, digital IS will just crop your image a little bit to keep it more stable. This is great if you're out and about and don't really want to deal with editing in post and stabilizing in post-production and things like that. And that's it. We've been over the best photo and video video settings that I found on the Canon R7. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to give a huge shout out to B&H Photo for providing this camera to me. Definitely check them out if you're interested in buying camera gear or buying an R7. They have a huge selection and always ship super fast, and they have a store in New York City that you can go and browse, and they have like tons of cool gear and things like that to check out. And if you want to read a guide on how to set up your camera, I also wrote an article you can read in the description below that it's everything we talked about here, but in an article form. And if you liked the video, remember to like and subscribe. And thanks again for watching. See you around.